I'm Rose Griffin, 38, a Navy commander who earned every stripe by showing up on duty, on time, every time. For years, I covered bills, solved crises, and kept my family afloat. But when my sister flew my parents to Rome on my wedding morning, leaving a note that I was a nobody in uniform, I drew a line that changed everything. Ever been dismissed or betrayed by the people you carried? Share your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I dive in, tell me where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to stand up for yourself after being wronged, hit like and subscribe for more true stories about boundaries and self-respect. What happened next might surprise you. The signs started 6 months before my wedding. Small things at first, comments that fell off, moments where the conversation shifted just a little too quickly away from me. My sister Lauren had always been the spotlight seeker, but something felt different this time. We were at Sunday dinner when I mentioned the wedding timeline. Mom was passing the potatoes, and I said something about finalizing the guest list. Lauren looked up from her phone and rolled her eyes. God, you're so type A about everything. It's just a party. She went back to scrolling, her manicured nails tapping against the screen. I mean, no one's really that impressed by the whole military thing anymore. Dad chuckled into his beer. She's got a point. All that pomp and ceremony. I kept cutting my chicken, but the knife felt heavier in my hand. These were the people who raised me, who supposedly knew me best. Yet here they were, dismissing the career I'd built, the life I'd chosen. I'd been promoted to commander 2 years earlier, something I'd worked toward for over a decade. But in this dining room, it was just playing dress up, as Lauren had put it the week before. The Instagram posts started ramping up around then too. Lauren's stories became a constant stream of champagne flutes, designer shopping bags, spa days with friends I'd never met. She'd caption them with things like, living my best life, or some of us know how to have fun. Never directly about me, but the timing felt deliberate. Every time I shared something about wedding planning or posted a photo in uniform, she'd follow up with something that screamed indulgence and freedom. At family gatherings, she had a way of redirecting conversations. I'd start telling a story about my deployment or a training exercise, and she'd interrupt with something about her latest vacation or the guy she was dating. Mom and Dad would immediately turn their attention to her, asking questions, laughing at her stories. I'd finish my sentence to empty air. "You're being dramatic," she said one evening when I called her out on it. We were cleaning up after another family dinner, and I'd finally had enough. Not everything is about you, you know. But that was the thing, nothing seemed to be about me. Even my own wedding felt like an inconvenience to them. When I talked about the ceremony, Mom would nod absently and change the subject to Lauren's latest promotion at the marketing firm. When I mentioned the guest list, Dad would joke about having to wear a suit. They treated it like an obligation, not a celebration. Lauren started making comments about my fiancé too. Michael was career military like me, steady and principled. She'd make little digs about how serious he was, how boring our relationship seemed. "Don't you want some excitement?" she'd ask. "Some spontaneity?" As if choosing someone reliable was somehow settling. The months leading up to the wedding became a series of small betrayals. Lauren would commit to helping with wedding tasks and then cancel last minute for something more fun. Mom would promise to call the florist or the caterer and then forget. Dad would agree to walk me down the aisle and then joke about how he hoped the ceremony wouldn't run long because he had a golf game after. I started noticing how they talked about my service differently when others weren't around. In public, they'd mention my rank with a kind of reluctant pride, our daughter's in the Navy, but at home, it became a joke. My uniform was a costume. My deployments were taxpayer-funded vacations. My dedication was taking things too seriously. The breaking point came 3 weeks before the wedding. I was showing Mom some photos from my engagement shoot, and she barely looked up from her magazine. Lauren was there, filing her nails on the couch. "These are beautiful," I said, trying to get some reaction. The photographer had captured something special, Michael and me in our dress uniforms, looking genuinely happy. Mom murmured. Lauren glanced over. "Very serious. Very official." She went back to her nails. "I hope you're planning to have some fun at the reception. All that saluting and standing at attention gets old." I closed the photo album. Something was building in my chest, disappointment, anger, something I couldn't quite name. These people had raised me. They'd seen me graduate from the Naval Academy, watched me earn my wings, celebrated my promotions with dinner out and congratulatory cards. But somewhere along the way, they'd decided that the person I'd become wasn't worth their genuine respect. 2 weeks before the wedding, Lauren announced she was planning a trip to Europe. Just something I've been wanting to do, she said casually over dinner. I've been working so hard and I deserve a break. When? I asked. Next month sometime. Haven't decided exactly. The wedding was next month. My wedding. But she said it like she'd forgotten, like the date hadn't been set for over a year. Mom and Dad nodded along like this was perfectly normal planning. I should have seen it coming then. Should have recognized the pattern that had been building for months. But I still believed, somehow, that when the day came, they'd show up. That blood meant something. That raising someone, feeding them, housing them, loving them, however imperfectly, created bonds that couldn't be broken by jealousy or indifference. I was wrong. But I didn't know it yet. I was still planning seating charts and writing vows, still believing that the people who'd shaped me would want to see the woman I'd become get married. I was still operating under the assumption that family meant something unchangeable, something you could count on even when everything else fell apart. The morning of my wedding would prove how naive that assumption was. I woke up on my wedding day to silence. Not the excited bustle I'd imagined, not the phone calls and texts I'd expected. Just silence. The hotel room felt too quiet, too empty. I'd stayed there the night before, tradition, Michael had said, though we'd been living together for 2 years. I was supposed to have breakfast with Mom and Lauren, supposed to spend the morning getting ready together. My phone showed no missed calls. No texts. Nothing. I called Mom first. Straight to voicemail. Then Lauren. Same thing. Then Dad. Nothing. A cold feeling started in my stomach. I told myself they were probably just running late, probably dealing with some last-minute emergency. But the silence felt different. Deliberate. At 10:30, there was a knock on my door. I opened it expecting to see one of them, frazzled and apologetic, ready to explain why they'd been unreachable. Instead, it was a hotel staff member holding a cream-colored envelope with my name written across it in Lauren's handwriting. This was left at the front desk for you, ma'am. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of hotel stationery. Lauren's looping script filled half the page. We're off to Rome. She's just a nobody in uniform, not worth celebrating. Below that, 3 signatures. Lauren's, Mom's, Dad's. I read it twice before the words sank in. Then I sat down hard on the bed, the paper still in my hands. They were gone. My family, the people who were supposed to be here, who were supposed to walk me down the aisle and cry during the ceremony and dance at the reception, they were on a plane to Italy. They'd planned it. They'd signed their names to it. They'd left me a note like I was a house sitter, not their daughter. The words kept echoing, nobody in uniform. Not worth celebrating. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the paper to get damp from my hands sweating. Long enough for the cold feeling in my stomach to spread to my chest, my throat, my head. Long enough to understand that this wasn't a misunderstanding or a last-minute emergency. This was a choice. Michael found me like that an hour later. He wasn't supposed to see me before the ceremony, another tradition, but something had made him worry. Maybe the same silence that had woken me up. What's wrong? He took one look at my face and sat down beside me. I handed him the note without saying anything. Watched his expression change as he read it. Watched his jaw tighten, his hands clench. Jesus, he said finally. They're gone. My voice sounded strange, distant. They left me. He set the note aside and took my hands. You're not alone today. I almost laughed at that. Almost. Because sitting in that hotel room, in my robe, with no family and no idea how I was going to walk down an aisle by myself, I felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. But Michael was there. And somehow, that had to be enough. 3 hours later, I was standing at the back of the chapel, and I understood what he'd meant. You're not alone today. Because the chapel was full. Michael's family filled the front rows, his parents, his siblings, aunts and uncles and cousins I'd met at holidays and barbecues over the past 3 years. My Navy friends were there, colleagues who'd driven hours to be present. People I'd served with, people who understood what the uniform meant, what the rank represented. The empty seats where my family should have been felt like missing teeth, obvious and painful. But everywhere else, there were faces that cared about me, people who'd chosen to be there. Michael's father walked me down the aisle. Admiral Griffin, a man who'd commanded aircraft carriers and earned medals I'd only dreamed of. He offered his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world, like he'd always planned to walk his son's bride down the aisle. "You look beautiful," he said as we started walking. "We're honored to have you in our family." I kept my eyes forward, focused on Michael waiting at the altar. But I heard the words, felt them settle somewhere deep in my chest. Honored to have you. Not nobody in uniform. Not worth celebrating. Honored. The ceremony was everything I'd planned and nothing like I'd imagined. Without my family's complicated energy, their subtle digs and forced smiles, everything felt cleaner somehow. More honest. When the chaplain asked who gives this woman, Admiral Griffin spoke up clearly. Her new family, and I do. New family. The words hit me harder than I'd expected. Because that's what they were becoming, these people who'd chosen to love me not despite my service, but because of it. People who understood that the uniform wasn't a costume, that the rank wasn't pretend, that the commitment meant something real. During the vows, I looked out at the congregation and saw respect. Pride. Joy. Everything I'd hoped to see from my parents, from Lauren, reflected back at me from people who'd known me for 3 years instead of 30. Michael's vows were simple and direct, like him. He promised to support my career, to understand when duty called, to be proud of the woman I was and the woman I was becoming. When he said the words, "honor your service," his voice caught slightly, and I realized he meant it in ways my own family never had. The kiss, the recessional, the receiving line, it all flowed like it was meant to be this way. Like the people who were supposed to be there were there, and the people who weren't didn't matter. But they did matter. Even as I smiled for photos and accepted congratulations, part of me kept waiting for them to show up. Kept imagining Lauren running in with some elaborate explanation, Mom crying and apologizing, Dad sheepishly admitting they'd made a mistake. They didn't come. And slowly, as the day wore on, I stopped expecting them to. Growing up, I was the reliable one. The daughter who could be counted on. While Lauren was getting her stomach pumped after a high school party, I was mowing the lawn. While she was crashing Dad's car into a mailbox, I was driving Mom to doctor's appointments. While she was failing calculus, I was staying up nights tutoring her so she could graduate on time. I'd thought it was love. Looking back now, I think it was convenience. The pattern started early. Lauren would create chaos and I would clean it up. She'd make mistakes and I'd fix them. She'd need money, time, help, support, and I'd provide it. In return, I got the satisfaction of being needed and the exhaustion of always being responsible for everyone else's problems. When I left for the Naval Academy, Mom cried like I was abandoning the family. "Who's going to help with Lauren?" she asked. As if that had been my job instead of theirs. As if raising her was something they'd assigned to me rather than taking on themselves. The military gave me structure, purpose, a place where my reliability was valued instead of taken for granted. I thrived there in ways I never had at home. My commanding officers recognized my potential and pushed me to achieve it. My colleagues respected my competence and counted on my judgment. For the first time in my life, being dependable meant being valued, not just being useful. But every time I came home on leave, the old patterns reasserted themselves. Lauren would be in some new crisis, money trouble, relationship drama, career disappointment, and everyone would look to me to fix it. I'd wire her money from my savings. I'd listen to her problems for hours. I'd give advice she wouldn't take and support she didn't appreciate. My promotions were met with polite congratulations and quick changes of subject. My deployments were inconveniences that kept me from being available when Lauren needed something. My achievements were overshadowed by her latest emergency. I remember coming home after making lieutenant commander. I'd worked for years toward that promotion, had competed against dozens of qualified officers, had earned recognition for my leadership and technical skills. At dinner that night, I tried to explain what it meant, the additional responsibility, the trust it represented, the doors it opened for future advancement. Lauren listened for about 2 minutes before interrupting. "That's great, but I need to ask you something." She'd been laid off from another job, needed money for rent. The conversation turned to her problems, her needs, her crisis of the moment. My promotion became background noise. That was the pattern. My successes were footnotes to her failures. My stability was a resource she could draw on when her instability caught up with her. My strength was something that existed to compensate for her weaknesses. I kept participating in it because I thought it was what families did. You helped when help was needed. You sacrificed when sacrifice was required. You put family first, even when family didn't put you first in return. The deployments were the hardest. Not because of the work or the danger or the time away, but because of how my family talked about them. To them, deployment meant I was unavailable. They'd complain about not being able to reach me, about having to handle Lauren's crises without my input, about missing me at holidays and family events. They never talked about what I was doing overseas. Never asked about the work, the responsibility, the weight of leading sailors in dangerous situations. They never acknowledged that I was serving something larger than myself, that the time away meant something more significant than inconvenience for them. Lauren would call my deployments taxpayer-funded vacations. Dad would joke that I was off playing sailor. Mom would count down the days until I'd be home and available again. Available. That's what I was to them. Not a person with her own life, her own goals, her own achievements worth celebrating. Available. A resource to be used when needed and ignored when not. The money I sent home over the years could have bought a car. Maybe a house. Instead, it went to Lauren's rent, Lauren's car repairs, Lauren's credit card bills, Lauren's emergencies. I told myself it was family obligation, but really it was enabling. I was making it possible for her to stay irresponsible by always being there to catch her when she fell. And my parents let it happen. Encouraged it, even. They'd call me when Lauren was in trouble, knowing I'd help. They'd guilt me into sending money, making arrangements, fixing problems that weren't mine to fix. They'd praise my generosity and reliability while taking it completely for granted. That history made the wedding day betrayal cut so much deeper. Because it wasn't just about missing one day. It was about 30 years of being taken for granted, of being valued only for what I could provide, of having my own accomplishments minimized while Lauren's problems took center stage. The note, "Nobody in uniform, not worth celebrating," was just the logical conclusion of how they'd always seen me. The uniform was a costume because my career was a hobby. I wasn't worth celebrating because I'd never been worth celebrating. I was worth having around when they needed something, but not worth showing up for when I needed them. Sitting in that hotel room, reading those words, I finally saw the relationship clearly. I wasn't their daughter. I was their insurance policy. I wasn't Lauren's sister. I was her safety net. I wasn't a person they loved. I was a function they relied on. And they'd rather be sipping espresso in Rome than watching that function get married. After the ceremony, I found myself in a quiet corner of the reception hall, holding a glass of champagne I hadn't touched. The reception was in full swing. Michael's family had made sure of that, but I needed a moment to process everything that had happened. For the first time in hours, I let myself really think about the note. About my family, somewhere in Italy, posting photos of the Colosseum while I celebrated the biggest day of my life without them. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to earn their love, their approval, their basic respect. The money I'd sent. The problems I'd solved. The sacrifices I'd made. The ways I'd twisted myself into whatever shape they needed me to be. And for what? A mocking note and plane tickets to Rome. The pattern was so clear now. I'd been playing a role in their family drama, but it wasn't the role I'd thought. I wasn't the beloved daughter or the cherished sister. I was the supporting character who made everyone else's story possible. The reliable one who cleaned up messes, provided resources, and never demanded too much attention or care in return. Lauren got to be the star, dramatic, unpredictable, always in crisis, but always forgiven. Mom and Dad got to be the long-suffering parents, dealing with one daughter's chaos while counting on the other daughter's stability. I got to be the background player who made it all work. But supporting characters don't get wedding days. They don't get celebrated. They don't get prioritized. They get used when needed and ignored when not. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It was just the loudest expression of what had been true all along. I'd spent 3 decades believing that if I was good enough, reliable enough, helpful enough, they'd eventually see me as more than just a resource. I'd thought that my promotions, my achievements, my steady progress through life would earn their pride, their interest, their genuine love. Instead, I'd enabled them to keep seeing me as exactly what I'd always been to them, the daughter who could be counted on to handle things so they could focus on more interesting people and problems. Michael appeared beside me, 2 plates of food in his hands. "You disappeared," he said, offering me one. "Just needed a minute." He sat down without being invited, settling into the quiet with me. That was one of the things I loved about him. He didn't need to fill every silence with words. He could just be present. "How are you holding up?" I looked out at the reception. His parents were dancing to some old song I didn't recognize. His sister was taking photos with her kids. His Naval Academy roommate was telling some story that had everyone at his table laughing. "They're good people," I said. "They are. And they love you." He followed my gaze. "Dad's been planning that walk down the aisle since we got engaged." He was honored when I asked him. Honored. There was that word again. Not obligated or guilt into it. Honored. "Your family loves me more than my family loves me," I said. It wasn't self-pity, it was just a fact. Michael set down his plate and took my hand. "Their loss." Such simple words, but they hit something deep. Their loss. Because what they'd lost wasn't just my wedding day. They'd lost the right to be part of whatever came next. They'd lost the opportunity to know me as a married woman, to be grandparents to my children if I had them, to share in the life I was building. They'd chosen a weekend in Rome over a lifetime of relationship. They'd chosen cruelty over love, jealousy over support, judgment over acceptance. Their loss. For the first time since reading that note, I felt something other than hurt. I felt free. Free from the obligation to keep trying to earn something that was never going to be freely given. Free from the role I'd been playing in their family drama. Free from the expectation that I owed them my energy, my money, my emotional labor just because we shared DNA. "I don't think I want to fix this," I said. Michael squeezed my hand. "You don't have to. I've been trying to earn their love my whole life. Maybe it's time to stop. Maybe it is." We sat in comfortable silence, watching his family, my new family, celebrate around us. These people who'd known me for 3 years cared more about my happiness than the people who'd known me for 30. They'd shown up not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They'd honored my service, respected my choices, welcomed me into their circle. Maybe that's what family actually was. Not the people who raised you, but the people who chose to love you. Not the people you shared blood with, but the people you chose to build a life with. My phone buzzed. A text from Lauren. "Rome is amazing. Having the best time. Hope your little ceremony went well." I stared at it for a long moment. Your little ceremony. Even from thousands of miles away, she couldn't resist the dig. I deleted the text without responding and put my phone away. Michael raised his champagne glass. "To new beginnings." I clinked my glass against his and finally took a sip. The champagne was perfect, crisp and clean, and full of bubbles that made everything feel lighter. To new beginnings, I agreed. The weeks after my wedding were strange. I kept expecting some dramatic reconciliation scene, Lauren showing up at my door with flowers and apologies, my parents calling to explain that they'd made a terrible mistake. But the silence stretched on. Lauren posted photos from Rome like she was on some grand adventure. The Trevi Fountain, the Spanish Steps, endless plates of pasta and glasses of wine. She looked radiant in every shot, glowing with the satisfaction of someone who'd gotten exactly what she wanted. The photos got hundreds of likes, dozens of comments. "Living your best life. So jealous. You deserve this trip." No one seemed to notice that she'd missed her sister's wedding to take it. Actually, that wasn't true. People did notice. Just not the people commenting on her Instagram. My aunt called 3 days after the wedding. "I saw the photos," she said. "It looked beautiful. But where were your parents? Where was Lauren?" I'd practiced this conversation in my head, but I still wasn't ready for it. They had other plans. A long pause. Other plans? For your wedding day? They went to Rome. Another pause, longer this time. They went to Rome instead of coming to your wedding. That's right. Oh, honey. Her voice was soft, shocked. I'm so sorry. More calls came. Cousins, family, friends, people who'd expected to see my parents and sister at the wedding and had noticed their absence. Each conversation was a small humiliation, having to explain that my own family had chosen a vacation over my wedding day. But something interesting happened as the week went on. Instead of sympathy, I started hearing anger. Anger on my behalf. That's unforgivable, my cousin said. I can't believe they would do that to you, said a family friend. After everything you've done for them over the years, said my aunt. People remembered things I'd forgotten. The time I'd flown home from deployment to help move Mom after Dad's back surgery. The year I'd paid for Lauren's apartment deposit when she'd gotten evicted. The birthday parties I'd missed because of military commitments, only to send elaborate gifts and call during the celebration. They remembered the years of me showing up, and they noticed the one day my family hadn't. Lauren's social media started getting different responses. Someone commented on one of her Rome photos, "Didn't you miss your sister's wedding for this trip?" The comment was deleted within an hour, but I saw it. More comments appeared. "Where were you last weekend? Thought you had somewhere important to be." Lauren's posts became less frequent. When she did share something, it was defensive. Sometimes you have to prioritize self-care. Not everyone understands the importance of taking time for yourself. Self-care. That's how she was framing it. Missing her sister's wedding was self-care. My parents stayed quiet on social media, but I heard through the family network that people were asking questions. Direct questions. Why didn't you go to her wedding? How could you miss your daughter's big day? I didn't tell anyone about the note. That felt too private, too cruel to share even with people who were supporting me. But I didn't need to. The facts spoke for themselves. Meanwhile, my life with Michael's family was everything I'd never known I wanted. His mother called to check on me, not because she needed something but because she cared how I was doing. His father sent me articles about naval aviation that he thought I'd find interesting. His sister included me in group chats and family planning conversations like I'd been part of their circle for years. They respected my career in ways my own family never had. When I got orders for a new assignment, they celebrated it as an advancement, not an inconvenience. When I had to work late or leave early for Navy obligations, they understood it as professionalism, not personal slight. I started to understand what it felt like to be supported instead of used. To be valued instead of taken for granted. To be loved for who I was instead of what I could provide. 3 weeks after the wedding, Lauren texted, "We need to talk." I stared at the message for a long time. 3 weeks of silence, 3 weeks of Rome photos and defensive social media posts, and now she wanted to talk. I could guess what the conversation would be like. She'd probably seen the wedding photos by now, understood who Michael's family was, realized what kind of connections and opportunities she'd walked away from. She'd want to smooth things over, get back into my good graces, position herself to benefit from my new relationships. The old me would have called her back immediately. Would have been grateful for any opening, any chance to repair the relationship. Would have been ready to accept apologies and move forward like nothing had happened. But I wasn't the old me anymore. The old me had died in that hotel room, reading that cruel note. The woman who'd walked down the aisle with Michael's father was someone new. I put my phone in a drawer and left it there. 2 days later, she called. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again. And again. Finally, I listened to the messages. The first one was casual, almost breezy. "Hey, just wanted to catch up. Give me a call when you get a chance." The second was more urgent. "I really need to talk to you. It's important." The third was desperate. "Please call me back. I know you're getting these messages." I deleted all 3 and blocked her number. My parents tried next. Dad called while I was at work, left a rambling message about misunderstandings and needing to clear the air. Mom sent a text, "We should talk about what happened." What happened? Like it was some mysterious event nobody could explain, rather than a deliberate choice they'd made. I didn't call back. Didn't text back. Didn't engage. Michael found me looking at my phone one evening, staring at another blocked call from Lauren. "Second thoughts?" he asked. "No," I said, and realized I meant it. "I just keep expecting to feel guilty." "But you don't." "I don't." That surprised me. I'd spent so many years feeling responsible for everyone else's emotions, obligated to fix every relationship, guilty when I couldn't make everyone happy. But sitting there, looking at evidence of my family's desperation to reconnect, I felt nothing. No guilt, no regret, no urge to make things right. "They made their choice," I said. "Now I'm making mine." Michael kissed the top of my head. "I'm proud of you." Proud. Another word my own family had rarely used about me, and that my new family used regularly. That night, I changed my phone number. 6 months later, I was promoted to captain. Michael's family celebrated like it was their own achievement. His mother sent flowers to my office. His father called personally to congratulate me. His sister posted on social media about how proud she was to have such an accomplished sister-in-law. I wondered if my parents even knew. If Lauren had heard through the family network, if they understood what they'd missed. But only briefly. Their opinions didn't matter anymore. Their approval wasn't something I needed or wanted. I'd built a new life, with new family, with people who loved me for exactly who I was. The uniform wasn't a costume to them, it was a symbol of honor and service. My rank wasn't pretend, it was recognition of real leadership and competence. My commitment wasn't excessive, it was admirable. For the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged, with exactly the people who deserved to be there. The lesson took me 30 years to learn, but it was worth the wait. Some bonds are broken not to destroy you, but to set you free. A year after my wedding, Lauren showed up at my workplace. I was coming out of a meeting when I saw her in the lobby, looking smaller than I remembered. She'd lost weight, and there were circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Hi," she said when she saw me. I stopped walking but didn't approach. "How did you find me?" "I called your old number for months. When I couldn't reach you, I hired someone to track down your new address, your work location." She looked embarrassed. "I know how that sounds." It sounded like stalking, but I didn't say that. "What do you want, Lauren?" "To apologize. To explain." She glanced around the lobby, probably hoping I'd suggest we go somewhere private. I didn't move. "Can we talk?" "We're talking." She shifted her weight, uncomfortable with the public setting, with my cold tone, with the fact that I wasn't making this easy for her. "I made a mistake." "We made a mistake." "The Rome trip was." She paused, searching for words. "It was poorly timed." Poorly timed. Like missing someone's wedding was a scheduling error. "You left me a note," I said. "Called me a nobody. Said I wasn't worth celebrating." Her face flushed. I was angry. I'd been drinking. "I didn't mean you meant it." My voice was steady, calm. I'd had a year to process this, to understand it, to move past it. "You meant every word." "No, you did. And that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion." I checked my watch. "But I have another meeting, so if there's something specific you need." She stared at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. The sister she'd known, the one who'd dropped everything to help her, who'd absorbed her cruelty and kept coming back for more, who'd spent decades trying to earn her love, that person didn't exist anymore. "I saw the wedding photos," she said finally. "Online. I saw who he is, who his family is." There it was. The real reason for the apology. "Michael's a good man," I said. "His family are good people." "I know. I should have been there. We should have been there." Her voice cracked slightly. I didn't know how important it was. It was my wedding day. How much more important could it be? I mean, I didn't know how important he was. His father, his connections. She trailed off, probably realizing how that sounded. "Right," I said. "You didn't know my husband could be useful to you." "That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant." I started walking toward the elevators. "Goodbye, Lauren." She followed me. "Wait. Please. I know I screwed up, but we're family. That has to count for something." I stopped walking and turned to face her. Family counts when it's mutual. When people show up for each other. When they support each other. When they celebrate each other's successes instead of resenting them. I can do better. I don't care. The words came out calm, matter of fact. I don't need you to do better. I don't need you at all. Her eyes widened. I don't think she'd ever considered that possibility, that I might not want her back, that her apology might not be enough. You can't mean that. I do. You taught me something valuable that day. You taught me that some people will only love you for what you can give them. And when you're not useful anymore, or when someone more interesting comes along, they'll abandon you without a second thought. The elevator arrived and I stepped inside. Thank you for the lesson. The doors closed on her shocked face. That night, Michael found me on our balcony, looking out at the water. How was your day? He asked, settling into the chair beside me. Lauren showed up at work. He didn't ask for details, didn't push for information I wasn't ready to share. Just sat with me in the quiet. She wanted to apologize. To explain. How'd that go? About how I expected. I turned to look at him. She didn't know who your family was when she planned the Rome trip. Now that she does, she thinks she made a mistake. Michael's jaw tightened, but he didn't say anything. She's not sorry she hurt me. She's sorry she missed an opportunity. I reached for his hand. That tells me everything I need to know about who she is. And who you are. What do you mean? You could have taken her back. Could have accepted the apology and pretended things were fine. A lot of people would have, for the sake of family peace. He squeezed my hand. But you didn't. You held your ground. I had. And it felt good. Not vindictive or cruel, just clean. Clear. I'd stopped participating in a dynamic that had never served me, stopped accepting treatment I didn't deserve. My therapist says that's growth, I said. Michael smiled. Your therapist is right. I'd started seeing someone a few months after the wedding. Not because I was falling apart, but because I wanted to understand how I'd ended up in such an unbalanced relationship with my family. I wanted to make sure I didn't repeat those patterns in my marriage, in my friendships, in my professional relationships. The therapist had helped me see that I'd been operating from a scarcity mindset, believing that love was something I had to earn, that acceptance was conditional on my usefulness, that I had to be perfect to be worthy of care. My family had reinforced that belief system for 30 years. But Michael's family operated from abundance. They loved freely, celebrated generously, supported unconditionally. They'd shown me what healthy relationships looked like, and now I couldn't unsee the dysfunction I'd grown up in. Do you think you'll hear from her again? Michael asked. Probably. But it doesn't matter. I know who I am now, and I know what I deserve. I leaned back in my chair, watching the sunset paint the water gold. I deserve better than people who only want me around when I'm useful. Yes, you do. We sat in comfortable silence as the light faded. I thought about the girl I'd been, so desperate for approval, so willing to sacrifice her own needs to keep peace in the family. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her own worth, who demanded respect, who wouldn't settle for scraps of affection. It had taken a betrayal to teach me that lesson, but I was grateful for it. Without that cruel note, without that abandoned wedding day, I might have spent the rest of my life trying to earn something that was never going to be freely given. Instead, I'd learned to recognize real love when I saw it. And I'd learned to walk away from anything less. 2 years later, I was standing in the same chapel where Michael and I had been married, but this time I was watching his sister Rose exchange vows with her longtime boyfriend. The whole family was there, parents, siblings, cousins, aunts, and uncles. Everyone dressed up, everyone genuinely happy to be celebrating love. I thought about my own wedding day, about the empty seats where my family should have been. The memory didn't hurt anymore. It felt distant, like something that had happened to someone else. After the ceremony, at the reception, Admiral Griffin pulled me aside. I have something for you, he said, handing me a small wrapped box. Inside was a Navy Cross pendant, not the medal itself, but a beautiful replica on a delicate chain. For the daughter who should have had someone to give her something special on her wedding day, he said. I started crying right there in the middle of the reception hall. Not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. This man, who'd known me for less than 5 years, had thought to honor me in a way my own father never had. Thank you, I managed. Thank you for marrying my son. Thank you for your service. Thank you for being exactly who you are. He hugged me tightly. We're proud to call you family. Proud to call you family. The words I'd waited 30 years to hear from my parents, spoken freely by a man who'd chosen to love me. That night, Michael and I were getting ready for bed when my phone rang. Unknown number, but somehow I knew who it was before I answered. Hello. It's Mom. Her voice was smaller than I remembered, uncertain. I got your new number from the family directory at the base. I sat down on the edge of the bed. 2 years of silence, and now she was calling. What do you want, Mom? I want to talk to you. To apologize. To explain what happened. What happened is that you chose a vacation over your daughter's wedding. What happened is that you signed your name to a note calling me a nobody. What happened is that you abandoned me on the most important day of my life. My voice was calm, factual. I don't need an explanation for that. We made a mistake. You made a choice. And now I'm making mine. A long pause. You're really not going to forgive us? Forgiveness isn't the same as relationship. I forgive you for being who you are. But I'm not going to pretend that who you are is someone I want in my life. But we're family. No, we're not. We're related. There's a difference. I looked at Michael, who was listening from the bathroom doorway. Family are the people who show up for you. Who support you. Who love you without conditions. You're not those people. We could be. You had 30 years to be those people. You chose not to be. I'm not giving you another 30 years to figure it out. Another pause. Your father misses you. He should have thought of that before he missed my wedding. Lauren's been in therapy. She's different now. Good for her. I hope she builds a better relationship with her next sister. You don't mean that. I do. I really do. I stood up, suddenly tired of the conversation. I have a good life now, Mom. I have people who love me, who respect me, who show up for me. I'm not going to risk that by letting people back in who've already proven they can't be trusted. We're your parents. You're the people who raised me. But parents are people who continue to love and support their children throughout their lives. You're not those people either. I walked to the window, looking out at the lights of the harbor. I hope you have a good life. I hope you and Lauren figure out how to be happy. But I hope you do it without me. Please. I hung up and turned off my phone. Michael came over and put his arms around me. You okay? I'm perfect. And I was. For the first time in my life, I was exactly where I belonged, with exactly the people who deserved to be there. I'm perfect. 3 years after my wedding, I made Admiral. The promotion ceremony was everything I dreamed of: formal, dignified, surrounded by colleagues who respected my service and family who celebrated my achievements. Michael's parents flew in for the ceremony. His father, now retired but still commanding respect in his dress uniform, had the honor of pinning on my new insignia. His mother cried during the oath, tears of pride for a daughter she'd chosen to love. My Navy friends were there, colleagues who'd watched me grow as an officer and leader. My new command team attended, showing their support for their incoming leader. The chapel was full of people who understood what this moment meant, who recognized the work and dedication it represented. After the ceremony, at the reception, I looked around at all the faces celebrating with me. 2 decades of service, and I'd finally achieved the rank I'd dreamed of since I was a child. I was surrounded by people who valued my accomplishment, who saw my promotion as the culmination of years of hard work and sacrifice. My phone buzzed with congratulations from friends and colleagues who couldn't attend. Social media filled with photos and well wishes from my Naval Academy classmates, former shipmates, mentors who'd shaped my career. But there were no calls from my parents. No texts from Lauren. No acknowledgement from the people who'd raised me that I'd achieved something extraordinary. And for the first time, their silence didn't hurt. It felt appropriate. Right. These weren't people who belonged in this moment, who deserved to share in this achievement. These weren't people who'd supported the journey that led here. I'd learned to build my own family, people who chose to love me, who showed up consistently, who celebrated my successes and supported me through challenges. People who saw my uniform as a symbol of honor, my rank as recognition of leadership, my service as something to be proud of. Michael found me during the reception, looking radiant in his dress uniform. How does it feel, Admiral? Perfect, I said, and meant it. Everything feels perfect. He spun me around the dance floor while his parents watched and beamed. While my colleagues applauded. while my chosen family celebrated the woman I'd become. Later that night, as we were leaving the reception, Michael's mother pulled me aside. "I want you to know something," she said. "The day we walked you down that aisle, when your own family wasn't there, that wasn't just about doing the right thing. That was about recognizing who you are, what you represent, what you mean to this family." She squeezed my hands. "We didn't step in because we felt sorry for you. We stepped in because we're honored to call you our daughter." Honored. That word again. The word that had replaced all the words my original family had never said. "Thank you," I said. "For everything. For seeing me, for loving me, for showing me what family really means. Thank you for letting us." As Michael and I drove home that night, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. The betrayal that had felt like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of everything. The cruel note that had broken my heart had also broken the chains that kept me tied to people who didn't value me. I'd learned that love isn't something you earn through service or sacrifice. It's something that's freely given by people who see your worth. I'd learned that family isn't determined by blood, but by choice, the choice to show up, to support, to celebrate, to be present for the people you claim to love. Most importantly, I'd learned that some bonds are broken not to destroy you, but to set you free. Free to find the people who deserve your love. Free to build the life you actually want. Free to become the person you were always meant to be. Standing in that hotel room 3 years ago, reading that devastating note, I thought my world was ending. I couldn't have imagined that it was actually beginning. That the people who abandoned me were making room for the people who would truly love me. That their rejection was actually protection, protecting me from a lifetime of trying to earn something that was never going to be freely given. Now, driving home as an admiral, with a husband who adored me and in-laws who treated me like their own daughter, I understood the gift they'd given me. The gift of clarity. The gift of freedom. The gift of knowing exactly who belonged in my life and who didn't. I'd finally learned to stop chasing love from people who weren't capable of giving it, and to recognize it when it was freely offered by people who were. I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who don't know how to love you back. The woman who'd walked down that aisle 3 years ago, devastated by her family's betrayal, was gone. In her place was someone stronger, clearer, more certain of her own worth. Someone who demanded respect and received it. Someone who gave love generously but only to people who treasured it. Someone who learned that the best revenge isn't cruelty or anger or elaborate schemes. The best revenge is building a life so good, so full, so rich with genuine love and respect that the people who abandoned you become irrelevant to your happiness. I'd built that life. And I was never looking back. 5 years after my wedding, Michael and I bought our first house together. It was a colonial in Virginia Beach, with a wide front porch and a backyard that sloped down toward the water. The kind of house I'd dreamed of as a child, stable, permanent, full of possibilities for the future we were building. We spent weekends painting rooms and planting gardens, making the space ours. Michael's parents came to help us move in, bringing dinner and staying late to help us unpack boxes. His mother hung curtains while his father assembled furniture, both of them treating our new home like it was as important to them as it was to us. "This is perfect for you too," his mother said, standing in what would become our living room. "You can see the water from here, and there's enough space for." She paused, smiling. "Well, for whatever comes next." Whatever comes next. We'd been talking about children, about starting a family of our own. The conversation felt different than it might have years earlier, because now I understood what family really meant. I knew how to create the kind of home where children would feel valued, supported, celebrated for who they were rather than what they could provide. That evening, after his parents had gone home and we were sitting on our new back deck watching the sunset, Michael brought up something we'd been discussing for months. "I got the orders today," he said. "The Pentagon assignment. 2 years, starting this fall." I'd known it was coming. We'd both known. His career was progressing as steadily as mine, and the Pentagon was an important step for any naval officer with ambitions of flag rank. "That's amazing," I said, and meant it. "You've worked toward this for years." "We both have. The assignment includes family quarters. Good schools for when we're ready for that." He reached for my hand. It means we'd be close to DC, close to where your family lives. The words hung in the air between us. Close to where my family lives. We hadn't talked about them in months, hadn't mentioned the possibility that proximity might complicate the careful boundaries I'd built. How do you feel about that? He asked. I considered the question seriously. 5 years ago, the thought of being in the same city as my parents and Lauren would have filled me with dread. The possibility of running into them, of having to navigate awkward encounters or unwanted contact, would have been overwhelming. Now, it doesn't matter, I said, and realized I meant it completely. They're not part of my life anymore. Where they live is irrelevant to where we live. Michael studied my face in the fading light. You're sure? I'm sure. They made their choice, and I made mine. Geography doesn't change that. I squeezed his hand. Besides, we'll be busy. New assignment, new responsibilities. Maybe starting our own family. I don't have time or energy to worry about people who proved they don't deserve either. 6 months later, we were settled in Bethesda, in a townhouse with a small garden and easy access to both the Pentagon and the Naval Academy where I'd been assigned as an instructor. The move felt like another beginning, another step forward in the life we were building together. I loved teaching. The midshipmen reminded me of myself at that age, eager, uncertain, full of dreams about serving something larger than themselves. I tried to be the kind of mentor I'd wished for during my own academy years, someone who recognized their potential and pushed them to achieve it. One afternoon, I was leaving my office when I saw a familiar figure in the parking lot. Lauren, leaning against a car that was definitely not hers, too expensive, too new. She looked older, more polished than I remembered. Her hair was shorter, professional. She was wearing a business suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. For a moment, I considered turning around and going back inside. But that felt like giving her too much power, like letting her presence affect my choices. Instead, I walked toward my own car like nothing was unusual. Hello, Rose, she said when I got close enough. Lauren. I didn't stop walking, didn't pause to make conversation. How did you find me? You're not hard to track down. Naval Academy instructors are public information. She fell into step beside me, uninvited. You look good. Happy. I reached my car and turned to face her. What do you want? To talk. To finally have the conversation we should have had years ago. She glanced around the parking lot, probably hoping I'd suggest we go somewhere private. I stayed where I was. I know you don't want to hear this, but I need to say it anyway. I was wrong. We were wrong. About everything. Okay. I pulled out my keys, making it clear I wasn't planning to stay long. You were wrong. Anything else? She blinked, probably surprised by my lack of reaction. Don't you want to know why? Don't you want to understand what happened? I already understand what happened. You were jealous of my life, my career, my relationship. You couldn't stand that I was happy, so you decided to ruin the most important day of my life. Then you spent years regretting it when you realized what you'd cost yourself. I opened my car door. That about sum it up? It's more complicated than that. No, it isn't. You made a choice. I made a choice. We're both living with the consequences. I got into my car, but left the door open so I could finish the conversation. The difference is, I'm happy with mine. I've changed, she said desperately. I'm in therapy, I have a good job now, I'm engaged to someone wonderful. I've learned how to be a better person. Good for you. I hope that works out. Rose, please. We're sisters. That has to mean something. I looked at her for a long moment, really looked. She was thinner than she'd been at my wedding, and there were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before. She looked successful but tired, polished but somehow diminished. You know what I learned about family? I said finally. It's not about shared genetics or shared history. It's about showing up. It's about supporting each other through good times and bad. It's about celebrating each other's successes instead of competing with them. I started my engine. You never learned how to do any of that. I could learn now. Maybe. But not with me. I already have a family. People who've proven they know how to love me, how to be there when it matters, how to put my happiness above their own convenience. I put the car in reverse. I don't need another sister, Lauren. And I don't want one who's already proven she can't be trusted. I drove away without looking back, leaving her standing in the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I could see her watching my car disappear, probably realizing that this conversation hadn't gone the way she'd planned. That night, I told Michael about the encounter. We were making dinner together in our small kitchen, moving around each other with the easy rhythm of people who'd learned to share space harmoniously. "How did that feel?" he asked, chopping vegetables while I seasoned the chicken. "Like talking to a stranger," I said honestly. She looked familiar, but I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, no urge to reconcile. Nothing. That's probably healthy. It is healthy. 5 years ago, seeing her would have ruined my whole week. I would have replayed every word, analyzed every gesture, wondered if I was making the right choice. I slid the chicken into the oven and set the timer. Today she was just irrelevant. What do you think she wanted? Access. To me, to our life, to Michael's family's connections. Same thing she's always wanted. I started washing the dishes we'd used for prep. She mentioned being engaged. I'm betting her fiancé has money or status, and she wants to add our military connections to her social portfolio. Cynical, but probably accurate. She trained me to be cynical where she's concerned. Years of watching her motivations, learning that she only reached out when she needed something. I dried my hands and turned to face him. I used to think that made me bitter. Now I think it makes me wise. Michael pulled me into his arms. "Wisdom looks good on you." 2 weeks later, Mom called. I almost didn't answer. Unknown number, evening time, the pattern I'd learned to associate with unwanted contact from my original family. But something made me pick up. "Rose?" Her voice was shaky, uncertain. "It's Mom. Please don't hang up." I didn't hang up, but I didn't encourage her either. "What do you need, Mom?" "Lauren told me she saw you. She said you wouldn't talk to her, wouldn't listen." A pause. "I was hoping maybe you'd listen to me." "I'm listening." "We miss you. Your father and I, we talk about you all the time. We see things in the news about the Navy, about Afghanistan or Iraq, and we worry about you. We wonder if you're safe, if you're happy, if you ever think about us." The manipulation was subtle but familiar. The implication that worry equaled love, that thinking about someone was the same as caring for them properly. The suggestion that I should feel guilty for not maintaining contact with people who'd abandoned me. "I am safe," I said. "I am happy. And no, I don't think about you." That's so cold. It's honest. You want me to pretend I miss people who hurt me? You want me to pretend I need people who proved I couldn't count on them? I sat down on my couch, settling in for what I suspected would be a longer conversation than I wanted. "I don't miss you, Mom. I miss the parents I thought I had, but those people never actually existed. We made one mistake. You made a lifetime of mistakes. The wedding was just the loudest one." I kept my voice level factual. "You spent 30 years teaching me that my achievements didn't matter, that my career was an inconvenience, that my role in the family was to solve everyone else's problems. The wedding day was just you finally saying out loud what you'd been showing me for years." That's not true. It is true. When did you ever celebrate my promotions the way you celebrated Lauren's job changes? When did you ever brag about my service the way you bragged about her latest boyfriend? When did you ever call to ask how I was doing without needing something in return? Silence. That's what I thought. I looked around my living room, at the photos of Michael and me with his family, at the commendations hanging on the walls, at the life I'd built with people who actually valued me. You raised me to be useful, not loved. And when I stopped being useful, you discarded me. We want to make it right. You can't. Some things can't be fixed, Mom. Some relationships can't be repaired. Some trust, once broken, can't be rebuilt. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the evening light reflecting off the water. "I don't want you to make it right. I want you to leave me alone. But you're our daughter." "No, I'm not. I'm a woman you gave birth to, but you stopped being my parents the day you chose a vacation over my wedding." I turned away from the window. I have parents now. People who are proud of me, who show up for me, who love me unconditionally. I don't need you anymore. "Rose, please, goodbye, Mom." I hung up and immediately blocked her number. Michael found me a few minutes later, sitting in the dark living room, staring out at the water. "Everything okay?" he asked, settling beside me on the couch. Perfect, I said, and meant it. Everything's perfect. Your mom. Trying to rewrite history. Trying to make the last 5 years disappear so she can feel better about herself. I leaned against his shoulder. She wants me to pretend their abandonment was just a misunderstanding, that we can go back to the way things were. But you can't. I wouldn't even if I could. The way things were was terrible for me. I spent 30 years trying to earn love from people who were incapable of giving it freely. I took his hand. I'm not going back to that life. Good, he said simply. That was one of the things I loved most about Michael, his ability to support my choices without question, without trying to fix things that didn't need fixing. He understood that some decisions weren't complicated, that some boundaries didn't need justification. A year later, we had our first child. Elena was born on a Tuesday morning in spring, after 12 hours of labor that felt both eternal and instantaneous. When the doctor placed her in my arms, I understood love in a way I never had before, immediate, unconditional, fierce. Michael's parents flew in the day she was born. His mother cried when she held her granddaughter for the first time. His father, the stern admiral who'd commanded aircraft carriers, melted completely when Elena wrapped her tiny fingers around his thumb. She's perfect, his mother whispered. Absolutely perfect. She looks like you, his father told me. Strong. Determined. I looked down at Elena, sleeping peacefully in my arms, and felt something settle in my chest. This was what family looked like. This was what love looked like. Showing up, being present, celebrating new life with joy instead of obligation. My phone buzzed with congratulations from friends and colleagues. Social media filled with photos and well wishes from my Naval Academy classmates, from sailors I'd served with, from the midshipmen I taught. The world seemed to be celebrating Elena's arrival with genuine happiness. But there were no calls from my parents. No texts from Lauren. No acknowledgement from the people who'd raised me that I'd become a mother. And for the first time, their absence felt like protection rather than abandonment. I didn't want these people around my daughter. I didn't want Elena exposed to their conditional love, their manipulation, their capacity for cruelty. I didn't want her to learn the lessons about family that I'd had to unlearn. She's lucky, Michael said, watching his parents fuss over their granddaughter. She'll grow up knowing what real love looks like. She will, I agreed. She'll never have to wonder if she's worth celebrating. 2 days later, a package arrived at the hospital. No return address, but I recognized Lauren's handwriting on the label. Inside was an expensive baby blanket and a card. Congratulations on your beautiful daughter, the card read. I hope someday she'll get to meet her aunt. I threw the card away and donated the blanket to the hospital's charity drive. Even in congratulations, Lauren couldn't resist manipulation, the implication that Elena was missing out on something, that I was depriving my daughter of family connections. But Elena wasn't missing out on anything. She had grandparents who adored her, aunts and uncles who would spoil her, cousins she'd grow up playing with. She had a family that had chosen to love her before she was even born. She didn't need relatives who would love her conditionally, who would try to use her as a way back into my life, who would teach her that love had to be earned rather than freely given. As I held my daughter that night, listening to her quiet breathing, I made her a promise. She would never have to choose between being loved and being herself. She would never have to earn approval by sacrificing her own needs. She would never have to question whether the people who claimed to love her actually did. She would grow up in a family that celebrated her successes, supported her dreams, and showed up for her unconditionally. She would learn that love wasn't something you had to work for, but something that was freely given by people who truly cared about your happiness. I'd learned those lessons the hard way, through betrayal and abandonment and years of choosing myself over people who didn't choose me back. But Elena would learn them from birth, would grow up knowing her own worth, would never have to fight for the love she deserved. Looking at her sleeping face, I realized that my family's abandonment had been a gift, not just to me, but to her. By cutting ties with people who didn't know how to love properly, I'd ensured that my daughter would only know the real thing. The best revenge, I'd learned, wasn't anger or cruelty or elaborate schemes. The best revenge was building a life so full of genuine love and respect that the people who'd abandoned you became irrelevant to your happiness. And now I was passing that gift on to the next generation. Elena would never know the pain of being abandoned by people who were supposed to love her, because she would never be exposed to people capable of that kind of cruelty. She would grow up free. And that's how I learned the hardest truth. Sometimes family walks away, and you're stronger for letting them. Have you ever been abandoned or underestimated by the very people who should have supported you? Did you cut ties, or give them another chance? Drop your thoughts in the comments and let's talk about it. If this story hit home, hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories about standing tall when others let you down.